I will call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. Nicole, please call the roll.
Alternate member Damian Butler. Alternate member David Vanderpool.
Here.
Member Cesar Marufo stated he would be absent this evening. Member Bacon.
Here.
Member Frank Parks.
Here.
Vice Chair Steve Cooley.
Here.
Chairman Thomas Lemasters.
Here.
Treasurer Baron Janetti.
Here.
Councilmember David Fenn.
Here.
Councilmember Julio Martinez.
Here.
It's my understanding that there was a request for absence from Cesar Marufo. Nicole, did you receive any other requests?
No, sir.
Vice Chair Cooley, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
The flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Are there any adjustments to tonight's agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to conflict of interest disclosures. Are there any to be made tonight? I will take that silence to mean that there are not. On the public comment period, please note, in response to Riverside County currently being in the orange tier, which allows for indoor gathering with modifications, this meeting will be open to the public and conducted in a virtual format to be inclusive of all participation preferences. Public comment participation is encouraged by emailing any comments to the City Clerk's office or by calling in using the phone number provided on the front of the agenda. We'll move on now to our action items. First, the approval of minutes.
Chairman, I do want to just for the record.
Yes, please.
Just state that I do not have any written comments, and I just want to check the phones.
All right.
Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
No callers.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I motion that we approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
Motion by Treasurer Janetti. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Second by Vice Chair Cooley. Any comments by any of the members? I hear none. Are there any comments from the public?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
No callers.
Thank you. Nicole, please call the roll.
Member Bacon?
Yes.
Member Parks?
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooley?
Yes.
Chairman Lemasters?
Yes.
Treasurer Janetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Fenn?
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez?
As I was absent, I abstain.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Item number 2, FY 2021 General Fund and Wastewater Fund Budget to Actual through May 2021. Staff report, please. Interim Director Jennifer Eustachian.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. Good evening. I have for you our general fund financials through the end of May. We are looking pretty good. We've received most of our property taxes. The remainder to come in are going to be small, and they'll trickle through. So we're expecting to exceed budget in that line. Our franchise fees have already exceeded our budget. Our sales taxes have been received through March and is trending to exceed budget. As you go down to our permit activity, the activity has picked up in the last few months, but it's still estimated to come in lower than budget. And our charges for services are expected to finish slightly under budget. And what we're looking to total at is our revenues are estimated to come in about 37.6 million, which is more than the 37.2 budget that we had. So that's really good. Moving on to our expenses, we've recorded 23 of 26 of the pay periods, and we are still expecting significant savings in that category. Operating costs are estimated to come in lower than budget. Utilities are coming in a little higher than we had budgeted, but there are savings in contractual services that more than offset that difference. On the capital improvement category, it's expected to come in below budget and total Total expenses overall are estimated at $33.3 million, which is below the $34.9 million budget. And we've separated out transfer outs due to council's allocation of the $6.9 million of one-time funds. And that's just for ease of understanding where we lie with those. And so before that allocation, there's an estimated surplus of $4.2 million. And when including those allocations, the net change in fund balance is a reduction of $2.6 million. So before I move on to wastewater, I'm open for any questions that you guys have with the general fund.
Are there any questions from members of the committee?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Are we anticipating revenues from the American Rescue Plan for the city that haven't been put as part of this budget as of yet?
Yes, there's an item that's going to council tomorrow evening. And then once that item is approved, you'll see that in the budget, but it will depend on tomorrow's meeting.
Thank you.
Jennifer, one thing that caught my eye on this, I know, most of the costs look like they're in line with what we've seen in previous months, but something that just did stand out to me on the revenue side was the shortfall compared to budget on cost recovery. Is there a single large contributor to that, like one primary driver that's causing that shortfall?
It could be mostly it's with the cost recovery. A lot of those are invoices that we send out. So there have been a delay on some of those invoices. We have our accounts receivable person who has to keep up on those invoices and where they are with payments. So she's been working on that for the past about 3 weeks, just trying to check in because a lot of them will start to roll in at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Before we move into the wastewater fund, are there any questions from the public or comments?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
There's no callers.
All right, Jennifer, please continue.
Okay. As wastewater goes, we have billed 5 of 6 payments and are estimating the revenues to total about $10.7 million, which is under the $10.9 million that we had budgeted. As expenses, we have personnel costs that also have the 23 of the 26 pay periods recorded. We still have a fourth quarter adjustment for position splits to record, but are still expecting significant savings in that category. On the operating costs, we're expected to be below budget, mostly to the brine line contract. It's not been in full use for most of the year. Utilities have also run a little bit higher in this fund, but not significantly. We have seen some emergency repairs for pump replacements and lift station repairs. So the capital improvement line costs are estimating higher than budget. And overall, the total expense is estimated at $10.4 million, which is less than the $10.9 million that we had budgeted. And overall, we're looking at a wastewater surplus of $245,000. So it's still looking to come in pretty good, even with those emergency repairs. And with that, I'll see if there's any questions.
Question.
Vice Chair Cooley.
We're seeing a significant savings expected in personnel expenses. So one-shot, one-time thing or something unusual happening?
No, it's pretty common. We've seen it on the general fund side too. What this is that in benefits might have been budgeted a little bit higher than what the actual costs are, along with you have vacancies that go on throughout the year. And so what that does is it comes in with the savings at the end of the year for those items. And that's kind of how they play out. For the next year's budget, we reduced the amount that we had anticipated for that budget to reduce the savings that we were having personnel. So I believe that in the next fiscal year, we'll see those savings be more in line with what the budget is.
Thank you.
Jennifer, did you finish with your presentation on the wastewater fund?
I am finished with that.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from the committee? Nicole, do we have any comments or questions from the public?
I have none.
Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
There's no one on the line.
The recommended action is to receive and file the attached reports. Is there a motion?
I'll motion.
Motion by Member Keith Bacon. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Vice Chair Cooley. Nicole, please call the roll.
Member Bacon?
Yes.
Member Parks?
Yes.
Vice Chair Cooley?
Yes.
Chairman Lemasters?
Yes.
Treasurer Janetti?
Yes,
Councilmember Fenn?
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yes.
Motion carries. Item number 3, list of subcommittees. May we please have the staff report from Interim Director Jennifer Eustachian.
Yes, thank you. At the last meeting, it was requested that we bring back a list of the subcommittees. And so Nicole and I went through some of the minutes, and what we have here is what we have come up with. And on June 3rd, 2019, there was a subcommittee for internal control review, and the members assigned to that subcommittee are Janetti and Cooley. And on October 7th, 2019, there was some tasks that were assigned by the City Council. And for those tasks, there were some subcommittees that were created. The first task was to develop a CFD training program for local realtors and develop a CFD frequently asked question document to post on the city's website. And the members assigned to this subcommittee were Olvera, Beneke, and Parton. The second task was to assist with the request for proposal process for independent financial audit services. That subcommittee was Cooley, Janetti, Molenkamp, and Parton, and that has been completed. The third task was to evaluate the City of Beaumont investment and financial policies. Members assigned to that subcommittee were Bengay, Janetti, Lemasters, and Molenkamp. And an updated investment policy was recently brought to the Finance Committee on May 10th and was approved by Council on May 18th. That's 2021. The fourth task was to evaluate the security of the City of Beaumont's telecommunications system, which resulted in discussion of the IT department to present policies and procedures to the Finance and Audit Committee to address this priority, and that task has been completed. The fifth task was to develop a process for grant reporting, which resulted in discussions of a presentation to the Finance Committee on grants to address that priority. I don't believe any members were assigned to that task. And the sixth task was to develop a financial training program for the general public. Members assigned to this subcommittee were Cooley and Molenkamp. And with that, the recommended action is to review the internal control task and assign subcommittee members as needed, review CFD training program and the FAQ task and assign subcommittee members as needed, review the City of Beaumont investment financial policies task, and I don't believe that, and subcommittee members as needed. That would be on the financial policies portion. Review process for grant reporting task and assign subcommittee members as needed, and review financial training program task and assign those subcommittee members as needed.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Are there any public comments at this time, Nicole?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
No callers.
All right, we will open it up for committee discussion. Comments from the committee are welcome. What are your thoughts on these subcommittees and assignments? Vice Chair Cooley.
I'd like to start on the Finance and Audit Subcommittee for Internal Control Review. Mr. Giannetti and I started on that, but because of COVID, we pretty much came to a halt because of the difficulty of accessing employee offices and employees. I think that one's important, and particularly with a new interim finance leader, I think we need to ramp that up as quickly as we can and plug that back in. I don't know if this committee is happy with the two members as currently established, or where they want to go with that.
Treasurer Janetti.
my comment on that, I think we need to follow up, especially based on last year's audit. We had five items in internal control. I know Jeff had sort of got those processes going, and from his standpoint at the last time he was here, they were all being enacted
Right.
evenly. I think we need to follow on that just as an observing to see that they are
Correct.
5 items.
I would agree.
As far as people, if people want to get involved, it doesn't have to be you and myself.
Are there any other comments in particular on the Internal Control Subcommittee? Yes, Councilmember Julio Martinez.
Yes, a quick question, just to remind myself our purpose and our the goals for that committee. So that committee was set up to follow up through the comments based on our audit that had to do with internal controls. And is that the sole mission of that committee?
That's the majority of it. However, the external auditors that we hire only gloss over that. They're more interested in looking and making sure that we're reporting dollars in the right place, expenses in the right place. And that internal subcommittee functions more as an internal auditor. So your external auditors will come in, they'll look at 1 month of bank statements. Our internal people would come in and look at most, if not all, of the bank statements, the payment card statements, just to make sure that we're plugging those things in that were brought up by the state and any ongoing, just a little bit further in depth. Typically, in an organization our size, you may or may not see an internal audit, and we're trying to cover that kind of activity with volunteers.
Okay, so to clarify then, activity related to the audit.
Correct.
That's the purpose of the committee.
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I need. I just want to make sure that we didn't have, we don't broaden it too much because, I don't want a micromanaging type of committee with staff because they're so busy. And I want to make sure we have a clear focus on what you're reporting back to the committee and then what we're reporting to council. So I think it's perfect. I think our goal is clear, and I think this is work.
The city and Mr. Mullenkamp put in a procedure for following up. Are they purchase cards or credit cards? I don't remember which.
Mm-hmm.
And just to make sure that those are being reconciled on a monthly basis as opposed to piling up until somebody gets a moment to do them or they rush through before the external auditors come in.
Perfect. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the committee? I know we've, as it currently exists, we have Treasurer Janetti and Vice Chair Cooley on that subcommittee. Is there anyone else on the committee who would be interested in volunteering to serve as a third member? I do not see any hands. Treasurer Janetti and Vice Chair Cooley, are the two of you interested in continuing your service?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an onerous task. It's coming in and saying this was the issue and talking to the people that are involved in the process. One, that they recognize there's a process now, and two, we're just saying it is being followed. I mean, it's not going to be more than that. We went over the bank records the one time. It must have taken us maybe a half hour or 40 minutes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sure. Correct. It's not.
Yeah, we don't want to bog the staff down unnecessarily, but it's one thing to say you have a process. It's another thing to say it's being followed, and that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, and I would argue that if there's a core function, a core reason for our committee being, besides reviewing policy, being a finance and audit committee, reviewing and making sure that those internal controls are being monitored and adhered to, that would certainly be one of those core purposes. Nicole, do we need to have a vote on committee members, or is it just an assignment from the chair?
However you'd like to take that, you can assign as you go and then do a motion at the end to make sure everybody agrees.
Okay.
That might be easiest.
All right, thank you. Then for the internal control subcommittee, right now we will have Treasurer Janetti and Vice Chair Cooley. The next item is the CFD training program and FAQ task. The current members are Vice Chair Cooley, Treasurer Janetti, Jeff Mullenkamp, who is no longer with the city, and Mr. Parton.
No, that's not correct. the people who were working on the CFD training program or none of them are here.
Okay.
It was Beneke and the
Olivera.
young lady that had her
Oh.
business.
Oh, you know
Olvera.
what? I'm looking at item number 2 on the agenda online. My apologies. It was Olvera, Beneke, and Parton.
Right. And
And Anna is gone, so is Mr. Beneke.
and they had done a lot of work on that and brought it up to the pandemic
Okay.
as far as execution.
Mr. Parton, could I ask where you and the rest of the subcommittee were at on that and what remains to carry the ball forward?
Well, I think if we're going to continue with that program, really probably need to get a couple more members kind of reestablished there. We had pulled together some of our core CFD program information. We had sat down with members of the real estate community and talked about what our program was, what information was there, had a conversation about the legislative construct, and then had worked up some general concepts with regard to the type of information we could try to put into brochures. And then from there, so we started pulling some information on that. We were supposed to reconvene, which was really kind of COVID, had intervened in our ability to get back together. So, but we had pulled that information together, had that sounding board meeting with the real estate community, and then really kind of came to some conclusions and looked at some materials that we could try to put together.
Okay. So since Mr. Parton, our city manager, is the only member of that committee left, we obviously need a few more subcommittee members, 1 or 2 at least. Is there anyone on the committee currently interested in serving?
Mr. Chair, I'd be interested in serving.
Yes, I see a hand from Councilmember Fenn. I see a hand from Member Bacon. Is there anyone else? There does not appear to be, so we will go with City Manager Parton, Councilmember Fenn, and Member Bacon.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Fenn.
So for Mr. Parton, so in a quick CFD search on the Beaumont's webpage, I found one that it's got some general information and it has the information maps, an explanation of Melrose, and then it has like the links for the CFD prepayments and a contact for Albert Webb and Associates. Was this a result of the work that the committee did, or was that something that staff put together separately on its own? And would the committee work on maybe information for this website update?
That is information the city has already been preparing and has been posting on the website. So that was already there, pre-existing to this. The concept that we were working on was how we could try to provide information to particularly the real estate community so that they keep up and they're educated. So as they're talking to potential buyers and clients, that they can explain to people what this Melrose is, how it works, and kind of some of those factors. And then it was to look at what additional upgrades to our on-site information do we want to provide and make available. And then the other concept was not to just kind of have a stagnant program, but to try to have some sort of annualized update that we do for the real estate community in particular with regard to kind of any adjustments or any kind of changes, or if there's any kind of new actors, any new, agents or brokers in the area that we have a chance to try to bring them up to speed.
Okay, very good. I think that helps clarify what the committee will do. And that's one of the reasons why I'm on the city council is the CFC taxes, and being a real estate broker myself, I think I could be a good addition and help out with that. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fenn. The third recommended action is regarding the Investment and Financial Policies Subcommittee. It appears that those members were Mr. Bengesa, who is no longer with the committee, Treasurer Giannetti, who looks like is a very busy man, myself, although I was not on the committee all of last year, so this is an old list, and Mr. Molenkamp, who is no longer with the city. So the only remaining member of that team is Treasurer Giannetti, so we need 1 to 2 additional members.
But
are-
I think we've completed the task.
That was
We-
my read on it as well.
Yeah. We reviewed the investment policy, which was updated, and the council passed it. We also, part of the recommendation was a financial advisor, which was RFP'd, and we participated in that, and that was approved. So I think at this point, the initial
Yep, the mandate has
mandate has
been
been
met.
fulfilled at this point, yep.
That's my read on it as well. If I may ask of Councilmember Martinez and Councilmember Fenn, if I can just get input from a couple members of the council. Do you gentlemen agree that that task has been completed?
Yes.
See an
Yeah, I
affirmative.
agree. I had marked that on my notes that I was going to comment on that, so
Okay.
I would agree.
Thank you very much. We will mark that task as completed then, and that subcommittee will no longer exist. The next item, the next subcommittee, the process for grant reporting. This, if I am looking correctly, it doesn't look like it had a subcommittee that had been formed. Is that correct, Nicole? Do we know?
We had a wanting to understand what the grant process was here, and we had a great presentation by one of the staff, I can't remember her name, that came in and explained how they go about it and their capabilities, because we were thinking there might be other opportunities. There probably are, but there's not enough staff to be able to put the grants in and then be able to manage the process. So at this time, it appeared that the city had a pretty good handle on getting the grants they needed to and the people to be able to handle the task. Is that right, Mr. Parton?
And as I recall, we had a member on this committee who had some expertise in grant writing or grant administration with the county or another entity, and she's no longer here. And I think that was a little bit of the driver, is that she was willing to bring some expertise, but we don't have access to that now. And I think even then, we would have felt the city was doing what they could. This was just an opportunity to pick up something else. But it was above and beyond what's needed, and it would have been nice to have, but we don't have that resource. So I don't think.
The big thing we understood is there is a process here. We are getting
Right.
our share of grants, and increasing more grants, and you're right, she knew how to do that process, would have put a work burden on, because somebody has to manage the grant and do all the reporting associated.
Yeah, given all that information, my thought would be that that mandate has also been met, and that we frankly lack the expertise to move forward with that subcommittee if we wanted to. Are there any thoughts from the other members of the committee? Councilmember Martinez.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're far enough along with staff that we can probably dissolve that with our tasks and make room for something else a little more pertinent with our time. So I would agree that that's probably time to have that dissolved. So that's what I would say on that.
Thank you, sir. Did I see Councilmember Fenn's hand?
Yeah, this question for Mr. Parton. So, Todd, often Kyle Warsinski gives a legislative update to council. Would this fall under that? Is it his organization that keeps an eye out for grants that's out there? And would it apply to the city? And so is there basically a staff element in place to be our watch finder for that?
Well, we really have a couple of sources that are standardized that come to us. WRCOG actually has a staff person who monitors and puts information out to all the member agencies with regard to grant opportunities that are out there. When I get that in, which comes in every couple months or so, I forward that to the staff to take a look at. SCAG, is another source of information that reaches out to us. So we're in the loop in terms of what's going on with other agencies, and then they have resources that provide that information to us. It's kind of interesting because just today I actually got one of these sales, contact emails. It's from a professional grant writing firm. I forwarded that over to Mission Station, to kind of research it and see. It's kind of one of those large firms, and what they do is basically they'll write grants and submit them typically, and they'll do it really at no direct cost to the city. They'll prepare them, they'll submit, and then if you're successful in the grant, then they get some revenue off that as part of the grant qualified cost. So we're looking into that also to try to see if we can bring somebody in to help us as a grant writing support. So, of course, with all that is understanding what are the costs associated with the grant to the city. For example, are we going to run single audits? Are there other things that we need to do and get ramped up for as we kind of logistically plan for those dollars coming in? So we have existing sources, and then we keeping some eye open for other kind of support services that can kind of come and help us at a low to zero direct cost today.
Okay, thank you. So in general, I would think this would be a completed item, and staff sees it as a need to report to either the committee or to the council. I have full faith in that they'll stay on top of it. So I think this is done as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Finn. Are there any other comments on this specific subcommittee? With that, I think that we will assume that this subcommittee's mandate has been met and will no longer meet. The next and final is the Financial Training Program Subcommittee. I see that the members were Vice Chair Cooley and Finance Director Mollenkamp, who is no longer with the city. We would need to add 1 to 2 members to the subcommittee. Vice Chair Cooley, is it your sense that the mandate has been met? Is there a need for this to move forward?
It hasn't been met. I don't think the need is currently as strong as it was a couple, 3 years ago when we had a...
Is your mic on?
I'm sorry, I turned the mic on. I don't think that need has been met. I'm not sure that the need is as important as it was 2-3 years ago when we had some members of the public that were putting out a lot of bad information as to what a financial statement was, a lot of bad information as to what an audit was. And I think the goal at that point in time with Mr. Mollenkamp and I was to do basically City Accounting 101, just in an overview. While that may be nice and could be something that could be done, I think that need has kind of drifted away as that bad press that we were getting with just bogus information is not being floated out there any longer. So I think that's one of the things that just kind of sits. If the council believes we should still spend some time on it, great. If not, we won't have any big loss.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cooley. Are there comments from other members of the committee on this particular item? Treasurer Janetti.
I agree that the issue was hot and heavy with some of the people that were pursuing past, employees of the city and all. But I don't think it's a bad idea to have a 101 finance thing to understand the city's finances. I hear a lot of that from the people where we live, Steve.
Right.
They just want to understand things. They're asking me these questions all the time. And I believe in communications and keeping it open. So if they could understand getting little snippets of information, just like what Jennifer gave us tonight, where we stand on the budget, it would make people feel comfortable and that could be put out. I don't know if it is right now, but to know that we're running good, we're running ahead with a surplus. We're not in the hole, because people always are asking me, are we on budget? We're in the hole, or taxes going to get raised, this and that. So maybe it was defensive the last time, but I really think it's proactive for the community.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments from other members of the committee?
I do have one.
Yes, Councilmember Fenn.
So being new kid on the block, I'm still drinking from a fire hose. It was beneficial by being in the San Gregorio Pass Water Agency beforehand, but their finances are very simple compared to the cities. So maybe if there's like a new member orientation or something like that, maybe for the finance, for the committee itself, or maybe for a new council member, or and even something that maybe can go to the public, I don't know, once a year or something. I don't want to overdo it, but just something is a quick read and a quick study, maybe a 1 or 2 page thing, just to say, you know, we have a general fund, we have a wastewater fund. This is the revenue we get. This is typically our expenses. This is an average, you know, year, so forth. Just maybe just a 10,000 foot, you know, beginner snapshot. And then maybe that can be updated. And maybe something like that could give Mr. Parton a tool, or any others who meet with any community or neighborhood organizations as their, you know, quick little, you know, status of the city update. You know, don't want to micromanage it, don't want to make it too difficult in terms of staff hours. But just a quick read would be helpful as, hey, here's where you start to understand the finances. And then somebody wants to dig in deep, by all means, let them do so.
Yeah.
But it would have been beneficial for me. And I still get a little lost in the numbers when we go through stuff, and it takes me a little longer to follow through. But I know that comes with time. But just a thought.
That certainly makes sense. And a lot of the questions that we were thinking we need to deal with is what's really a CFD, what's really a pass-through, and those are the kinds of things that my thought was is a overview of where a city gets money, where the city spends their money, where the city shares revenue and it shares expenses on that level, and just answering some of the, we were getting some ridiculous questions about where some money had gone or when money was going. That part of the ridiculous questions, I think it's gone. It's no longer in the public's, in their face every day. But I think as far as general information and just explaining, I think it's a great idea. Whether it's done as a once annual thing or a question and answer period to anybody that is new and comes on board, or any citizen, I think has a definite value, and I'd be glad to help in any way I could.
Yeah, I think if I can chime in with my 2 cents here, that it wouldn't hurt if perhaps the subcommittee, once we've got it fully formed, worked on a PowerPoint presentation that goes over some of the basics, to your point, of Finance 101, City Finance 101. Then maybe, dedicates 1 or 2 slides to frequently asked questions, like the ones, Treasurer Janae, that you hear in the community where you live, or that any of us hear, or that any of us think of when we see any kind of a city or state or federal budget. If the city, starts to run a deficit, how is that covered? Where does the money come from if you're on track to, reach a deficit? Is there a change in the spending pattern if that happens? Do things just not get purchased by the end of the year at that point? It probably would not hurt to develop that and just have it available on the website, for example, so that people who have those questions can see that, FAQ document, that presentation, and see if that answers it. And if it doesn't, they can always bring it forward to the Finance and Audit Committee in a meeting during public comments. Just my thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, the understanding, it's interesting. People think their property taxes cover the whole bill for the city. They don't understand that we have sales tax, gas tax, permit money that comes in, that it's not, it's the taxes, property taxes is just a part. It's not even the majority of the money revenue we bring in, for them to understand that.
Yeah, and they have concepts that goes more to the CFDs, that a certain dollar amount of whatever taxes to go for a specific activity or a specific item to be built. And it's kind of hard to get rid of that concept. So yeah, that's the kind of thing we were thinking about trying to clear up.
Okay.
I think the committee could come in with an initial recommendation of something short. Yeah, this shouldn't be a long, premier 3-hour presentation. It should be a few slides that covers the basics, that can be updated if you're going to show current numbers at all.
Are there any members of the committee who'd be interested in supplementing Mr. Cooley on this task force?
I would.
May I see, who was that? Was that Member Vanderpool?
Vanderpool.
Yes, Member Vanderpool, thank you. Are there any others?
I can assist with that.
Jennifer?
All right, Jennifer Eustachian, thank you. So we will have Vice Chair Cooley, Member Vanderpool, Interim Finance Director Jennifer Eustachian. And that is the final recommended action on this. So before we ask for anything else, are there any public comments before we proceed to a motion?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
No callers.
All
Mr.
right.
Chair?
Yes, Treasurer
There
Janetti.
was one other item that Jennifer mentioned, and it had to do with the security. We
The
were-
IT security?
Yeah, we were asked to, as a committee, to sort of independently, impartially look at the security that was set up by our information technology people. So we did have that presentation. So I mean, I
Okay.
would believe that task is done, that we fulfilled the mandate on that particular item. But we did have a presentation that Edgar came in and gave
Okay.
us to show where he was and that he had a plan on building this. We could nowhere build what we want right now because of the cost, but he's slowly implementing those things in a priority.
All right. If there are no objections from any other members of the committee, I'm inclined to say then that that mandate also has been met. Are there any objections? I hear none. So then the recommended action would be to continue the Internal Control Task Subcommittee with Treasurer Janetti and Vice Chair Cooley as members. The CFD Training Program Subcommittee for local realtors, City Manager Parton, Councilmember Fenn, and Member Bacon as members of that. The Financial Training Program Task Subcommittee with Vice Chair Cooley, Interim Finance Director Jennifer Eustachian, and Member Bacon as members of that. Is there a motion?
I make a motion.
Real quick, it was Member Vanderpool for the financial.
Sorry, my apologies. Member Vanderpool, not Member Bacon for that financial training program.
Yeah, it was Vanderpool.
Thank you for catching us. Treasurer Janetti.
I make a motion that we move forward with the three committees as identified and the team members on those subcommittees.
Motion by Treasurer Janetti. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Councilmember Fenn. Nicole, please call the roll.
Member Bacon?
Yes.
Member Parks? Member Parks?
Yes.
Thank you. Vice Chair Cooley?
Yes.
Chairman Lemasters?
Yes.
Treasurer Janetti?
Yes.
Councilmember Fenn?
Yes.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yes.
The motion carries. Next item on the agenda is subcommittee updates. And after that previous item, I think we've probably gotten them, but I will ask, are there any updates from any of the subcommittees? I think the one that has been active to an extent was the Internal Controls Subcommittee. Vice Chair Cooley, Treasurer Janetti, is there any update besides what we've heard to this point?
No, there's not.
Thank you.
COVID's going away. That's the best update we can give you.
And that is a fine update to hear. Thank you. Are there any comments on this item from the public? Nicole?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
No callers.
Any comments from the committee? I see and hear none. Next item is future agenda items. Are there any members of the committee with future agenda items they'd like added? I hear none. Moving on to the next item, meeting review, Treasurer Janetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly on the financials, we're in the same shape we've been tracking for the last several months. We continue to show a surplus both in the general fund and in the wastewater, which is a very positive effect at this time of the year through May. We reviewed the subcommittees that we had established, I'm going to say at least 2 years ago they were established, and we have come up with 3 that are still active that require some action: the internal controls, CFD training, and the financial training, and we have people assigned to those from the committee. We looked at the investment policy, grant reporting, and the security of the info systems to be completed at this time. That's my report.
Thank you, Treasurer Janetti. Are there any comments from the committee on the treasurer's comments? Any comments from the public?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, do we have anyone on the line?
No one on the line.
Next item, Finance Director's comments. Interim Director Eustachian.
Thank you, Chair. So we got a budget adopted on June 1st council meeting, and we're starting to shift our focus back to audit. Our auditors were here the week of May 16th. They started their interim audit fieldwork. And what they do when they come out is they're essentially testing internal controls. So we only have a few outstanding items left from their visit. It was both in person and virtual. I haven't received any feedback from that yet, but they will be out for their year-end audit fieldwork in October. It's the week of October 10th. So that going on to that, we've had at a recommendation from city manager, the finance department is going to be visiting the different departments within the city to understand the operations side of things a lot better. So from the beginning of operations all the way to the end when it goes to invoice and payment. And we actually visited our first department last week. That was the wastewater treatment plant. That was very eye-opening to staff here. We really enjoyed it and learned a lot about operations. And it was good for the staff because a lot of the terms you can put to the word to your actually site of, okay, that's what that is and that's what that means. So when we're paying these bills, we really understand it, have a better understanding of how things work. So we're really looking forward to visiting other departments and getting the full picture of the operations within the city. So besides just paying all those invoices that come through, it was a good recommendation.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Are there any comments on the Finance Director's comments from the committee? Nicole, are there any public comments?
I have no written comments. Jennifer, anyone on the line?
No one on the line.
Thank you very much. With that, the next regular meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee is scheduled for Monday, July 12th, 2021 at 6 p.m. And if there is no objection, I will declare this meeting adjourned at 6:48 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.